Hello, my name is Achim Berg. I'm a senior partner with McKinsey and Company, and I'm leading McKinsey's global apparel, fashion, and luxury group. It's my great pleasure to be your host today for a panel on the role of the leadership in creating prosperity, with three very senior people in this industry that are very committed and enthusiastic about sustainability. So let me first introduce the three panelists to you. So we have Helena Helmersson, who's the group CEO of H&M. And I think that probably doesn't need any more explanation. It's one of the world leading global fast fashion players. We also got David Schneider joining us, I assume from Berlin, who's the co-CEO of Zalando, which is Europe's largest multi-brand apparel retailer. And we got Roger Lee from Hong Kong, who's the CEO of Tal Apparel, which is one of the leading and most innovative manufacturers for the fashion industry. So thanks a lot to all three of you for joining us for this session. And we're looking forward to a lively conversation. I have a couple of questions for you about the CEO agenda. We will also allow Q&A towards the end of the session. I think, let's have some fun together, which also means if you want to comment on what the other colleagues said or contradict, you are more than welcome to do so. Let's start with an opening round. Would be great to get 2 or 3 sentences from each of you about the framework of the fashion CEO agenda and why the CEO agenda is important for you personally, but also for your respective organizations. Helena, do you want to go first?
Sure, thank you. I would say that if you move alone as a single company, of course you can achieve some, but it's really when you come together and join forces that you can create this type of prosperity for all. And for me, that is really what the Fashion CEO agenda is all about. It's about defining a common direction for all stakeholders in the industry to truly drive, systemic change and change the industry. And that is regardless if you're big or small, or if you're working with luxury, or if you're a high fashion brand. So that is what it is to me.
Thank you, Helena. David, why do you engage with the GFA and the fashion agenda?
Yeah, I strongly agree to what Helena said, because I'm also a very strong believer of collaboration and shared priorities. And I think that's the purpose of this agenda. I also think, it's really the case that no one here alone, has the capabilities or the leadership position to really make these kind of meaningful changes. But I also think if we put together different capabilities that we have, we can really create a strong momentum. I think it's about also knowing what are areas we can, where you can lead, what are areas you want to follow. And if you look at, for example, ourselves, Zalando, I think we can play a leading role in certain areas and then push boundaries, especially when it comes to understanding customers or use of data, digitalizing, connecting businesses, when it comes to leveraging the customer reach to make choices available, transparent for consumers. I think those are areas where, we really want to take a stand. And then if you take examples like circular systems, which you put here on the agenda, I think there's so many examples where you can use this to produce the right products in the first place, or to make the matchmaking efficient between demand and inventory, or taking back inventory at scale to resell, recycle. We could talk about that for quite a while, but I think it's quite exciting. I think what we can do then.
Yeah, we will. So, Roger, what's your perspective? Helena is representing a vertical retailer and a brand. David is more, a multi-brand retailer. You are on the manufacturer side. So, why is it important for you to engage with GFA and the CEO agenda?
I think what people may not see behind the scenes is that there are tens of millions of people in this industry, and a lot of manufacturers, from large to small manufacturers. And when we started looking at this back in 2009, this has been 12 years already. We had to educate ourselves. And what drives greenhouse gas? What contributes to that? How much water are we actually using? There's a lot of things that sound very simple, but it's actually not that simple if you don't have any facts or don't know what contributes to that. So we got to think about how many manufacturers are around this world, and without a clear guideline, it's very hard for them to know where to start. People who are a little bit larger, like ourselves, we've been fortunate. We've started this early. We spent a lot of time to learn, but not all manufacturers are the same. And I think it's good to have this framework to focus on the areas that we should be looking at together, so that we can educate each other through this process. Without a framework, it's very hard to know, if you're a manufacturer in Africa, where do I start?
No, and obviously the framework is a bit of a means to an end, yeah. And it all starts, I think, with a conviction that there is a need for change. So it's a bit probably for this panel and also for the audience we have, which is very international and quite skilled, maybe a bit obvious, but why is it so important for the fashion industry to really engage on the sustainability topic with all its different shades? Maybe a question to all of you.
I can go first. I think that, again, to having a common direction as this provides, like a common platform, is really, really important, because that would in the end mean that we share the same priorities, right? And that we come together around certain areas where we want to drive big change and systemic change. And that becomes so much more impactful and powerful, because if we wouldn't, it would be rather confusing, both for consumers and for partners. If we, for example, look at a big collaboration on a sustainability index on products, like we collaborate with Zalando and with many others. If everyone would go on their own sustainability index and ways of measuring, for a consumer and a customer, that would be so confusing. How could they compare and know how to make sustainable choices? And actually, same for suppliers. If they are working with buyers and each buyer has their own kind of assessment tool, that would cause a lot of confusion and a lot of work for suppliers that wouldn't really drive that impact. So it is really important.
Mm-hmm. But it also
maybe to add, sorry, to add to the customer angle. Yeah, what we see like in the customer behavior is that there's like such a strong demand for it. Yeah, and they, especially like the younger generation, they ask so much for like more transparency, or want to understand actually, what sustainability actually means. But it's a very hard thing to provide that information. Yeah, but we see like, the first indications. If we do so, then it really works. Customers, they, that articles convert better. It creates like lots of engagement. Customers act on it. And I think that is very encouraging, but it comes back to what Helena is saying. It's, it's super hard. Like, we have to work together on like making that actually available and creating that kind of access for customers and being able to provide these choices. And I think there's not only like this, on the one hand, there's like this need to act. On the other hand, it's also like, if you see that reaction, if you do things, then you also see it's very much aligned with like what customers are actually looking for. And, then I think like the stars align a bit between like, the right thing to do, but also like, what is actually good for business and how do we actually grow in such a healthy way.
How do you work with your brands? Because I think you made some changes, over the years on how to interact with them, also how to, I was tempted to say, force them to be more transparent and to be, to change towards sustainability. Maybe you can elaborate a bit on that, David.
Yeah, sure. Of course, we work with many brands on a lot of dimensions. Maybe like a couple of pop to mind. One is, of course, we can decide who we work with and how to raise the bar. Here we can set ethical standards, and we can also say, we only work with partners that actually align with them. And so, I mean, one example is that we've made really a sustainability assessment mandatory for all our brands. And again, here, of course, difficulty of joint definitions and standards. I mean, that's why we work with SAC's HIC BRM tool, for example, to get to that information. And then on other dimension, of course, also like we don't only want to like force into it, and say, okay, this and this, of course, we can raise that bar, but then also like how do we actually collaborate and on certain things, for example, how we digitize business and really, help with inefficiencies in the overall system, or also how to co-create product and stories. I mean, ramped up like the more sustainable assortment quite a bit. I mean, right now it's like over 100,000 articles we can flag like that, and that's very much like in collaboration with all the brand partners.
Roger, how, I think David now elaborated a bit more on the relationship between, the consumers, and the platform. You just said, you started, 10 years ago to look into sustainability. And I assume 10 years ago, not all the brands were really interested in sustainability. Have you seen a similar change, on the brand side that that David can observe with the customers?
Yeah, so maybe I'll take a step back. We've been focused on the environment for many years. Actually, over 25 years ago, we had our first wastewater treatment plant when people actually didn't care what was discharged. We had ours 25 years ago. But back in 2009, we actually started talking about creating our own sustainability report, really holding ourselves accountable to what we do. And this was way before anyone was talking about it. But really I think what people sometimes forget and we take for granted because we know what's going on in terms of sustainability is our industry is probably the second largest pollutant in the world. Okay. We're using a lot more raw materials than the earth is generating every year. The temperature is going up, they say probably three degrees. Now for people older generation, 3 degrees, what's the impact 3 degrees? We keep forgetting that actually there's a huge impact at 3 degrees. And even trying to get down to 1.5 degrees, where we're trying to get to now, is a huge task. And we're way behind in terms of getting there. We're trying to catch up, and it's a huge headwind trying to get there. As we all know, there's a lot of challenges. So we've got to remind ourselves every day, this is what reality is. The younger generation, for sure, are now challenging brands and saying, what is your sustainability plan? What are your targets? What are you doing about it? Because the younger generation has been educated in schools where we weren't when we were in schools. And I think that's important because then that asks the brand, what are you doing about it? I can tell you, I can share with you, I was in a conference with a global brand. I won't say who it is, but they had 50 manufacturers and they say, me as the CEO, I didn't think anything about sustainability when I joined a few years ago. But when we did customer surveys about the brand, what they're asking about the brand, everyone kept asking us, what are sustainability goals? So now we have to publish them. We have to commit to something. So I think consumers should continue to force brands to be accountable to what their goals are. And I would say, a couple of years ago, I was fortunate to be in Copenhagen speaking, and I saw some other brand CEOs come in, and they had to commit something. They committed something before coming to Copenhagen. So I think by bringing them here to talk, if you don't have a plan, you can't really speak about it. So we got to keep doing that and forcing brands to be accountable and come up with plans. But the good news I would say is in the last 24 months, I've seen a lot of brands finally committing to goals. Now that we're committed, how do we actually execute that? That's the challenge.
Mm-hmm. It's great to hear that. And also talking to my clients, it's quite interesting that it's not only the customers, it's also the employees. I think it's also quite important for your own organization. Helena, do you also observe that your own large number of employees is really caring about it and also wants the management to move into the right direction?
Yes, I truly do. I think it's amazing once you start to articulate clearly what kind of ambition we have when it comes to sustainability, and also when you kind of integrate it also in your internal system, so to speak, what kind of passion that I see in the company. I think it's really fantastic, and that's why I think integrating sustainability as much as possible is really the way to also change and do this journey internally. For example, how you can, integrate it also in governance. And with that, I mean, integrate sustainability in the direction for the company, which often is quite, visionary and aspirational. And that's why it's important that once you break that direction down, maybe into top objectives, and you find key results in how to measure progress, you should really make sure that sustainability is part of that, so that you get the feeling of sustainability being, the financial profitable growth. It should be about people and be about planet, and that comes more naturally. So at least we have worked really hard of taking next steps in integration, making sure that it's really part of the direction, and even part of, incentive frameworks, to make sure that we also internally make it into a more systemic approach. And at least what I see when doing that is that you also unlock creativity. I'm fortunate. I work with so many creative people within H&M Group. And once you start to, create this system, you see all these creative ideas of trying out new business models within existing brands, such as rental with Arket, for example, or remake with H&M brand, resell, that we have a business venture called Selfie, and how we can work with that. Trying out subscription models, and that is not coming from me, of course, or the top. That is coming from creative people within the organization that is really passionate about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the agenda also, then looks at enablers, and I think you mentioned some of them already when it comes to governance. I think others are the business model, innovation, digitization, traceability, transparent communication. So I think it would be interesting for our audience, and also for a lot of decision makers that are watching us now, or hopefully later the recorded version, which enablers the three of you feel are really making a difference. And maybe starting with you, Roger, this time. I think traceability, from a manufacturer's point of view, traceability, I would assume, must be an important topic. Is that an important enabler for you?
Yes, I mean, to me, traceability is the fundamental thing you have to get right in order to be able to judge whether a product was made in a sustainable way or not sustainable way. I think the challenge today is the technology and the traceability systems we have are very weak. So I think that, and it gets more complex because people may not understand that. Let's say, for example, a raw material, say I'm wearing a cotton shirt. The cotton can come from many different countries blended into one fabric. And how do you trace that? Once it's made to the fabric, it's very hard to trace. And then each country, the way to do farming is different. So the contribution to greenhouse gas may be different. So it's actually quite a complex calculation to do. But to me, traceability is absolutely important. What David talked about a little bit was the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, SAC, and the HIC Index. I think that while that's not only about traceability, it's talking about already have the system in place. We need a standard in place, because as Helena said, you can't have 50 brands having 50 different standards. We as a manufacturers cannot, in a factory that produces for 50 customers, have 50 different ways of working, or 50 different ways of measuring. So I think the best hope we have in this industry is the HIC Index, which many brands have been working on for many years to come together. And I think this year I think some brands are going to actually be launching it this year in the market. And if we can do that, then it will force people to say, okay, if I want to get the score, I better have a traceability system in place. If not, I'm not going to get the score. So we're also doing it from a different point of view, is that we want to have the score. We want to have a good score. We've got to get traceability. That will generate new businesses that will come up and help our industry to create traceability systems, because it's just very weak today. So I think new companies are already starting, and more can join into our industry to help us create this, for example, a traceability system.
Which I think obviously connects to the point that was made earlier by more or less all of you, that you can't walk on your own, or you can walk, but it's not going to have the same effect And I think the complexity that it creates, on the manufacturer's end, where you already have to deal with all the different PDM systems and all the different data systems. If you now add traceability in 100 different shades and forms to it, it's a complete overkill. And I think the result is likely then less impact for the planet and waste of resources and energy.
Yes,
so I think
and maybe I'll add a little bit on traceability on the social side. A lot of countries don't have sufficient labor pool, so they actually need to bring in labor from different countries. And there's a term that some people call modern slavery, which is someone applies for a job from a foreign country coming into working to the host country. The sourcing country may charge them a lot of fees in order to get the job. And it's really hard to trace how many people actually make money from that worker before they come in. So there's a lot of traceability systems that need to be in place for foreign workers coming in to host country. So it's not just on the environmental side, on the social side, we also desperately need systems.
And it's far from trivial. I think also in my working experience over the last 15 years, people think, oh, it's just a garment. But, as you say, I think it goes back to actually to the fiber and where that was, generated. And you cannot even, from a DNA test, you cannot even identify organic cotton. Yeah. So in that sense, if you don't check all the way with every stakeholder involved, you're never going to have a proper transparency. And I agree with what you said, David. I think the consumers are much more interested in the topic now, and it also looks like first time for long they are also willing to make a difference at the tilt. Yeah, because in the past they were more talking about it than really acting accordingly. So
I think if we build on this, if we make it traceable and use more standards and have more common definitions, I think then we can also work a lot on the transparent communication towards customers. And I think there's a lot of potential. On the other hand, it's also a big challenge. If we ask customers, we launched this attitude behavior gap report jointly, and it's very clear, customers, they have the willingness, but they just don't understand it. It's so hard for customers to actually, compare, to understand, to actually see, what are the definitions behind. And we don't even have all the information available. Yeah. So I think that is I would love to build on this, if we have those joint standards, and then also working on really making this easy to understand and transparent to customers. And also in a very open, honest way. So really enabling customers to make choices themselves. Yeah.
And probably also admitting that this is still a long way to go. I think with all the effort that the three, you three leaders, but also your organizations and GFA and all the partners, are pushing into it, it's still a long way to go. It's not going to be perfect, as of tomorrow. It's just too complex and, not trivial enough to make that change overnight. I would assume governance also plays an important point. And Helena, would love to understand, how have you built governance, within H&M Group to support, the agenda that you described earlier?
Yeah, I guess I would repeat a lot of the points that I was raising before, because governance really to me comes from how you integrate sustainability and how you also not talk about sustainability only as environmental questions, only as social questions, but always link it also to profit and profitable growth. That's really when it gets sustainable. So to me, again, this is truly about integrating these topics in the whole direction of the company. It's about breaking that down into goals. So if you would take our climate goal, for example, 2040 climate positive, you have to break that down, first of all, into milestones, right? So that what does that actually mean 2025 at least? And then the different parts of the organization would break it down. What does that mean next year? And what does it mean for me? So a climate goal would, of course, we would have to look at the value chain and how to which parts that has the biggest impact. So that would, for example, end up as a big goal for supply chain, right? So it's all about breaking it down and having a bit of discipline in that and integrating it, because that's how you then follow up. And again, same with incentive systems or incentive frameworks, that you are not only measured on the financial part, there's other aspects that would make us sustain for a really, really long time. And again, that's to me how at least I think about the driving systematic change within the company. And again, how to create also a system that would allow for creative ideas to be born. And I guess this is a never-ending journey. I see things every week that we can do even better to kind of develop this system further.
Yeah, which also then means if you break it into KPIs and if you measure it and if you make it relevant for, as an incentive, you also need to adapt it, because, you will broaden your efforts, you will change some of the efforts, you add a new index to it. So it's also a living system. It's not, one thing you just implement and then execute. So
of course it is. And also, if you're truly customer centric, you also follow what customers say about sustainability, right? And we clearly see an increased awareness in that. And I think that also fuels a lot of passion internally that would, really make it integrated in the customer offer, of course, in the customer experience. Because it clearly shows that attracts many customers, and they want to feel safe with coming to H&M or Arket or COS.
Let's talk about successes but also failures, because this is a journey. So I assume you can't get it right always first time. So David, some examples of what works, what doesn't work, or at least takes another attempt to make it work.
What really works, I was also surprised to see how well it works if you give customers choices. And if you have like similar articles and you can flag one as more sustainable, you have certain criteria behind like how you define that, but you actually see that, customers actually buy those articles more. Yeah. Or we had a big campaign for Earth Day, and was kind of like a takeover idea, like really, it was super present, very visible on our homepage, on the app, and you actually saw like the click-through rates on these campaigns was way higher than many other campaigns we do. Yeah. So I think this data like is really encouraging. Yeah, and I think really triggers you to do more. When it comes to like, I don't know, challenges, of course there's tons, again coming to this availability of information, and can we actually, would love to create like lots more like custom experiences around it and create like different access and different information level, but it's super hard like that at scale, to do this like work with like 4,000 brands. It's really hard to get there. Yeah. And I think then there's also like, I think also like great stories around like when you come to like pre-owned, for example, I enable customers to send back in like used articles. Yeah. I think also like create like great engagement. Yeah. But of course then, what do you do with it? Like, scale up like the reselling or like the recycling, of course. That's like, there I think we're still at the very beginning of that, but again, like I think all the indicators, I think it's very encouraging if you see like how the customer engagement works, but like also like many challenges we have to figure out as an industry.
Thank you, David. I think it brings it to life, and in the end, as so often, thinking it consumer back, makes most sense. And given that we have the demand on that end, I think, that should provide a clear direction. Roger, examples from your side, from the manufacturing side, what works, what is, challenging beyond traceability? I think we already got that point.
I think there is a bigger picture issue that we've been talking about, but still no one is taking sufficient action. I would say we're in the 80-20 rule, where 20% of the brands really care about sustainability and build that into their decision and who they buy from a manufacturing point of view, for example. I'm very happy to see Helena and her organization investing a lot of money outside of H&M to help drive technologies and things forward. But that's, to me, 20%. 80% of the brands still don't really put the money where the mouth is. Mm-hmm. In that, if we say, you know what, we can produce a garment, 80% less water, but we need to use a more advanced technology, we're willing to pay 5 cents for it. No, 5 cents is too much. 0 cents, you give it for free, I'll do it. Mm. But why is that? Because a higher level, the board holds the company accountable, the financial markets hold the company accountable for financial performance. And the financial markets or the big funds that own brands these days don't force brands to commit to goals and use the goals to make decisions, sustainable goals. And there are lots of things we can use.
But Roger, isn't that changing? Probably also for the my other two panelists. You read a lot now about sovereign wealth funds and other big investors that start to care about it. Do you feel there is a difference coming on the financial side? It's not only about shareholder value.
Maybe I'll take it and then I'll hand it off to the other two. I think at a manufacturing point of view, because we really get to see the brands come to us and every season discuss cost and all that. No, I mean, no one has come and said, okay, because of what you're doing here, I'm going to pay you 10 cents more. Mm-hmm. Or can we work on this together? I know it's a higher cost, but I can offset it by talking about it to the customer. I haven't seen any change from that point of view. But people are talking about it, so I'm very hopeful that many more brands will be doing that in the future.
Helena, David?
Well, I would say, as I keep on talking about the integration because I think that is so important. So as you make decisions, how do you make sure that sustainability is as integrated as possible, and then also partner up with others to drive that type of change? And when it comes to also more financial market, then I'm thinking about the sustainability linked bond that we issued some time back, and the enormous interest that we saw when doing that, and also collaborating with those stakeholders. That at least made me realize that, both awareness and interest and willingness to drive change has really, really expanded.
Mm-hmm. I think we only got a couple of minutes left. Given that this was about the role, or still is about the role of leadership in creating prosperity, I think it came across already that the CEO and the top management plays a crucially important role in this. Because if you do not lead that change, if you do not set it on the agenda, integrate it into the strategy, integrate it into the KPIs, I think a sustainability department on its own, won't do the job. So we have a lot of people from a lot of different places, on this planet that are really interested in the topic. What are your 2-3, recommendations to the decision makers on how they can make the change, happening in their own organizations? What's your learning from, working on it? And maybe we start with you, David, this time.
For me, is really putting sustainability. I think it has to be tied to like the core strategy. It shouldn't be like some kind of like on top investment or like on top projects, but it needs to be tied to the core. And I think the way, our organization, for example, works best is really, you have to set out like ambitious goals, but you don't tell people how to get there, because teams will figure it out. And there's so much creativity in there. And again, for this topic, there's so much passion coming from the teams that we actually tell the organization, look, this is really tied to like our overall purpose, to our overall strategy. We ask any team whatever plans they come up with. We always ask them, so how does it actually pay into that? And yes, teams come up with like, I think, great ideas. And whatever they do, like I think it's become like very much part of those like core questions you ask. Yeah. I think that's
but
the
if
thing.
I get you right, your recommendation is setting ambitious targets, getting the creativity of the team and ensuring that the team is able and has the resources, to achieve the target.
Yeah, I mean, if that's one of the main goals you set out, and that's really tied to your overall purpose and overall business strategy, yeah, then I think that's you send out the teams with that task, and I think they come up with great solutions, and they also come up with like very great ways to actually tie it also to like this overall strategy and overall business results. Yeah, because I don't think that's necessarily contradictory. Yeah, it's not like you of course sometimes you have these kind of trade-offs, but many times you also really can you actually can make it work. And but you have to give the resources and the strategic guidance to the teams to actually come up with those solutions.
Mm-hmm. Roger, any recommendations, from your path, over the last 25 years, 10 years with TAL, how should others, create the change?
I think we have, as an industry, we have more tools now. I think GFA is one of them. The sustainable account, the SAC HIG index is going to be very important. I'm hoping that brands will support this. While it's not there's no perfect system out there. To me, it's the one system that brands have spent the most amount of time to define, and we've got to implement that. We've got to get brands and manufacturers on board. Internally, we started using HIG as an internal management for our factories 4 or 5 years ago when the module was still in infancy. Because if we don't have a common way to measure, we don't have a common way to figure out which is a better product and versus another, consumers can't make the choice at the end of the day. So my thing is, as David said, set goals, standards, but use common goals that we've defined in industry and not set your own, because then we'll be talking different languages.
Mm-hmm. Helena, what are your recommendations to fellow CEOs and senior leaders?
One word that I've said many times during the last 20 minutes, integrate in different ways, because that will it will fuel creativity, and also you can then also as a CEO be quite hands-on, because there will be blockers that you can be part of removing. For example, we saw the need for resources on recycled materials and moving towards the climate goals. So that was really how we initiated the sustainability linked fund as one example. So integration is number one. Mm-hmm. Two, I think, is transparency, because it's better you admit that there's a lot of things to do and that there are challenges and that you will succeed sometimes and you will see failure sometimes, right? So you won't come anywhere if you pretend that everything is perfect, but rather, raise challenges so that you can deal with them and also allow failures on the way. And the third one, I would say, is definitely to partner up. I can't mention how many partnerships we have today and have had in the future that has really been crucial for us to create impact. And that like this, I have to mention, of course, wearing pink like I never do, but today I do, because this is made together with a partner, Fabrics, so made out of 30% CO2 emissions. The winner in the Global Change Award last year. We wouldn't have come up with this idea, how to make a t-shirt out of carbon emissions. And that's just a small innovative step. And we have many, both big and small steps internally that has been created through different kind of partnerships.
Thanks a lot to all three of you, I think, for that inspiration. Hopefully, that creates some change out there. Looking now at a number of questions that came in through the Q&A. I think let me pick the one or two that could be stimulating. So I think one question here is, do you think that companies are in charge to educate customers and community? Or, is it more following what the customers want anyway? So how much do you have the job, or your organizations have the job to educate the other stakeholders more? David, you're nodding, so take that as.
I mean, to be honest, it's both, and we recently even asked customers, almost a similar question, and they do. Many actually say that they see a lot of responsibility also with companies to actually provide transparency, and provide the information. So I think there's a lot like on the industry. But also found encouraging that also many customers actually say that they also see it up to them to change the behavior. So, I mean, I know it's not a very straightaway answer maybe looking for, but it has to go both directions. So I think there is a lot on the industry to actually provide the right information and, make everything accessible. And again, like I talked a lot about, like, making choices available to customers. And, if those choices are available and transparent, then it's also on the customers to see. And, I think there's so much data we can read back then and actually see what works, what doesn't, and, go into those things. I think that's why it's also so exciting for us to, if we talk about digitalization, and so like really working with this kind of consumer reach and working with the data to actually feed back what customers actually do and what they say.
I think, Roger, with you, I would expect you would agree. I think you already said, only 80-20. So, or put it, you said 20-80, which makes an important difference here. How do you try to educate, your customers, and also, I think, your partners on the production side?
I think it's important what Helena, to remember what Helena said, which is to partner and to share information across, because everyone is doing different things, looking at new ways to create dye stuff, for example, in a much more non-chemical way, but not many people know about it. So if we can collaborate and share information more, and not think that by sharing information we become less competitive, actually we become more competitive as a group. I think that's very important. And I think that it should be consumers educating themselves, should be consumers asking us to educate them. And in some places, there should be some regulatory rules, making sure that we adhere to some future goals, and educating us to what we need to do. So I think it's a combination of everything.
Maybe last question that came up also in connection with the title of today's sessions, but also of our session, which is creating prosperity. What does that mean for you, Helena?
That means definitely the combination of, profitable growth, of making sure that you grow, but decouple that from the use of natural resources so we can restore the planet. And also then having a positive impact on people that you touch, customers, colleagues, communities. That kind of combination is really what I would say is growing in meaningful ways, so that as you grow, you also make sure that you have a positive impact at a larger scale. That's how I would define it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I think really enjoyed that discussion. I hope our audience concludes in the same way. So thanks a lot to all three of you for being that open and also being that encouraging. I think to hopefully a lot of people out there that will follow the example that you set. And I think it came up so often. It's so much about collaboration. So let's invite other players in the industry at all different parts of the chain, to become part of that movement. And I think GFA is a great platform to support that. So great pleasure to have all three of you. Great honor, to to ask some questions and to keep the juices flowing. So thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks to the audience, have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.